I think my favorite thing about music, just in general, and especially jazz, is that you can practice your entire life and you'll never reach a point of getting there completely. Like there will always be somewhere else you can go. There will always be a greater proficiency that you can achieve, or a different style that you can learn. I think that's really exciting. Like there's always something to do. Like I'm never going to be bored.
My interest in jazz is really, I give credit to my mom for my interest in jazz music, and my grandparents, they're co-conspirators.
My mom had always liked it, so it would be on sometimes in the house. So I started getting more into it, started listening to it, and getting excited about it. And yeah, the more I listened to it, the more I loved it, and the more stuff I heard, and I was like, man, I want to be able to do that, you know.
When I was about 4th grade, I think, I was really interested in 50s rock and roll. That was like my big thing. I actually kind of like would cover my ears when I heard modern music because I just wanted to listen to old rock and roll. And my mom got me a turntable. My first turntable when I was like 4th or 5th grade, and she got it for me for like $5 at a garage sale.
I would sometimes consider my life and think about my life in terms of kind of before and after I started playing jazz. I played it before I listened to it, which is something that no one should do, but I did that. And I played it because I just liked improvising, and jazz was music based on improvisation.
I think the biggest draw about jazz for me early on was just this idea of improvisation and this idea of like spontaneous composition, and that was just really appealing to me because I saw like these master jazz players, and it just seemed magical. There's something magical about it. Just the fact that out of nowhere they could create this beautiful music or this really funky music, or like they could just, so many different styles that they could recreate.
Jazz basically started out of the combination of syncopation and march music in New Orleans in the early 1900s. In the mid-1920s, we experienced a shift in the jazz paradigm with the advent of electrical recording, which greatly enhanced the musicians' ability to express themselves. In the 1930s, with the advent of radio, people could listen to jazz music for free. In the 1940s, right after World War II, you start seeing the advent of bop and hard bop with musicians such as Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Dave Brubeck, and all these other musicians that want to take jazz to the next level of artistic expression. Since then, basically, we've had a plethora of different jazz genres with like hard bop, experimental jazz, free jazz, all these different genres. It's almost like every type of musical taste that people have without listening to jazz can find something that they can relate to.
Everyone likes something within that 100 years. You just have to find what it is, and then not tell them that it's jazz.
Jazz has been such an integral music, not only to American society and the musical development in this country, but it's actually made like a worldwide impact. You can see how profoundly it's impacted just other styles of music that we have today, like all the R&B and rap and hip hop and rock and roll even, like those come directly out of jazz. Like you would not have those genres without jazz.
People have been talking about jazz being a dying art form since the 30s. And jazz musicians were very upset back then. And they were like, this is not true jazz, or whatever. Like, this is the death of jazz, and this is how we know it's on its way out because of this abomination. And when they were talking about the death of jazz, it was like more popular than it had been since the 30s. Jazz musicians at that time, during the 90s, when jazz and hip hop, like with A Tribe Called Quest is a great example of it, were doing stuff with hip-hop influences. They were making jazz tunes with hip-hop beats, and people really liked it. The same thing is happening now with one of the guys I just talked about, Ron Carter, Miles Davis's bass player, on their album The Low End Theory. Now, if you take that album and say, this is jazz, this is coming out of the jazz tradition, and you can't understand this or appreciate it unless you really study jazz and listen to Charlie Parker and Miles Davis, and you have no business listening to this if you haven't studied these guys and the way they play as well, because then people will just not want to listen to it.
So the question of whether or not jazz is a dying art form should really be directed at what kind of genre of jazz is a dying art form. As a whole, I feel that jazz is starting to make a comeback now that it can be fused with even more types of alternative music, because now we're mixing jazz with techno, with electro swing, and we were mixing jazz with hip hop. So I think that jazz is, as much as it can be, alive and well. Well, I've been collecting old jazz records for about 2 years, and I decided that it was about time to do something with them besides just letting them collect and take up space. My show is, it's called Off the Record on WIUX, and it's literally transfers off of records from my collection. My favorite record has got to be Clementine from New Orleans by Gene Coldget from about 1926 or 1927. And it is just an absolutely beautiful song. It almost makes me cry every time I listen to it. Probably going to dance to it at my wedding.
Song of Praise off the album One Up, One Down, Live at the Half Note is my favorite song, which is it's hard for me to pinpoint that, but like, yeah, it is the most emotion I've ever heard in any song. Another thing about jazz music is that I was going through what I'm pretty sure was depression before, but I never got it formally diagnosed or whatever, but there was something was up before that, and I had difficulty kind of doing the things I enjoyed, and basically it got me, I don't know, it has changed a lot of my life, and it's changed a lot of the way I think about things. And I mean, it's a very kind of unique career that I went into. I was going to do linguistics before, and I'd still like to do something with that somehow, but you know, only so many hours in the day.
Just jazz as an art form has just shaped me as a person inherently, just because I've spent so much time with it. It's just so much fun to play. There's something enjoyable about it. There's a joy of the music that is just inherent. I think a lot of music has that, but especially jazz. For me, that connection is really powerful. You know, if you just let the music and what you've practiced and what you've learned just kind of flow out of you, you tend to get better results. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet with music. I have a pretty heavy background with the church and gospel music as well, which actually relates really well to jazz. So I might pursue like playing church music pretty heavily, or I might try to make it in New York at some point. I might go with more schooling. I'm not really sure what I want to do yet. But yeah, we'll just see what happens.